So good morning all. As Paul says, my name is Joe Power. I'm the head of manufacturing in the Cork site in our GSK manufacturing operation in Cork. We produce active pharmaceutical ingredients for medicines, but in GSK in Ireland we have operations in Dungarvan, in Sligo, and we indeed have a commercial office in Dublin. So today what I'd like to do is just give you a sense initially of what sustainability means to GSK as a wider corporation and what we're focusing on, and just give you a snapshot of what GSK as a whole is doing, and then maybe later do a deeper dive into the activities in Cork, the journey we've been on in terms of sustainability and some of the progress that we've made there. And when I talk about sustainability initially from a corporate perspective, we tend to think of this in a wider sense of sustainability, so that focuses on things like important topics like healthcare for all across the world, access to medicines, respect for people, ethical behaviours, and of course then environmental sustainability, protection of the planet. And there's a real sense within GSK that if we want to prosper as a company, then we had better look after the resources of the planet and be responsible in what we do. A little bit about GSK. For those of you who don't know us, we are a global healthcare company, science-based healthcare company. The mission of the company is to help people to do more, feel better, and live longer. And you can see that mission kind of sits with the ambition to protect the planet for the people that live on it. We operate in three key areas. Pharmaceuticals. We have a pharmaceutical division, and we supply over 4 billion packs of prescription medicines to people across the world in many different therapy areas. Notably, respiratory is a big area for us, as indeed is HIV and others. We have a vaccines business. We produce over 800 million units of vaccines a year for both children and adults for various different infectious diseases and others. And we have a consumer healthcare business producing over 18 billion packs a year of different consumer healthcare products, many of whom you'll be familiar with. So I think when we talk about sustainability in GSK, one of the things that we realised in looking at this topic is that we've got to look beyond the walls of our own factories and our own warehouses and so on, and look to the entire supply chain, and to have ambitious goals right across the supply chain. And in 2010, the corporation looked at this and set some pretty ambitious goals for 2020 in a 10-year horizon. You can see those on the right-hand side of the slide. And these goals refer to the entire value chain. So 25% reduction in the overall carbon footprint in terms of carbon. In terms of water, 20% reduction in its impact. A zero operational waste to landfill. 90% of paper packaging coming from responsible sources. So pretty aggressive targets for 2020. We have further targets which go beyond 2020. And I'll talk about how we're getting on with each of those targets at a corporate level. I mentioned the value chain. So the value chain really for us starts with the choice of raw materials and the supply of raw materials from our various suppliers, our internal operations, the logistics of what we do in getting medicines and products to patients and consumers, the products in use, and disposal. And so a quiz question for you all. Maybe you can confer with the people next door to you, but from a carbon footprint perspective, where would you think our largest carbon footprint is in terms of percentage use? So where are the big hitters in this? So I won't ask you to individually answer the question, but to give you a sense of it, it might surprise you to discover that actually 46% of it is actually in product use. Quite a large amount of it. And then 40% in raw materials. And so you can see for a company like GSK, if we just focus internally, we're actually only hitting 11% of the problem. And we do focus internally, absolutely, and you'll see some of that later. This is where I come in. But it's important to realise that we understand there is a wider responsibility here, and we've got to focus on the full picture. So where's that 46% coming from? Well, in fact, respiratory is a big area for us. We produce respiratory medicines for people, and this is a growing area right across the world as people get more and more access to medicine and demand, quite rightly, demand the right to to be treated appropriately. Meter dose inhalers have been in use for many years and continue to be growing. Meter dose inhalers are in fact our biggest source of greenhouse gases as a company, and we're working to try and reduce the impact of those products. And at this point in time, all our new products actually come in a new format where propellants are not used, and we're using a dry powdered format for these inhalers, and that reduces the actual carbon footprint of these units by a factor of between 16 to 20. So there is no propellant used in these new units, and in fact the carbon footprint is associated with the manufacture of the plastic devices which are produced there. So as we refresh our medicine portfolio, all our new footprint will come without these inhalers, and we will begin to make serious inroads into this aspect of our operation. I mentioned the raw material side. 40%, a big part of our carbon footprint as a whole as a corporation. I think there are two parts to this. It's selecting the right raw materials in the first place, and then selecting the right suppliers and working with those suppliers in a responsible fashion. And this is a challenging area because, particularly for regulated medicines and so on, manufacturing changes are difficult to achieve. The regulators quite rightly are extremely concerned that any changes don't change the nature of the product, and that the product is still suitable for human consumption and meets all the requirements. But we work in this area to try and make changes. All our new medicines by first intent are designed to be are designed with the concepts of green chemistry in mind, and we look at our existing portfolio of products and look to find more sustainable ways of making those. And so, for example, one of our big antibiotics, amoxicillin is the active ingredient in it. Amoxicillin historically has been made, it's been a very heavy solvent usage. In the manufacture of that, we are now just opening up a facility in our Singapore manufacturing operation where the manufacture of that will happen entirely without solvents. There's an enzymatic route to this has been developed and avoids the use for solvents. And where we do need to use solvents and reagents, we look to maximise the recovery of those through maximising solvent recovery, reducing the volumes that are needed, and in some cases re-engineering the actual manufacturing product, as we've done, for example, with the product, HIV product at Bakivar, where through re-engineering the route to the product, we've managed to get a 7% overall carbon footprint saving on that one. So a lot of work to be done at the raw material end to try to reduce the footprint of that. Equally well, working with our suppliers is actually pivotal. With so much of the entire carbon footprint depending on them, understanding where our suppliers sit in terms of sustainability is really, really important to us. So at GSK we've established an online collaboration platform with all our suppliers for exchanging information, ideas, initiatives, and engaging with them both online and through workshops to help them to reduce their energy footprint, to help them to reduce their water footprint and waste footprint. And we have worked with our key suppliers in terms of energy workshops, going into those suppliers, providing them with a structure, diagnostic tools and so on to help them reduce their own energy footprint. And these diagnostics are based on our own internal experience of them, which you'll see in a few moments. We have an EcoDesk platform, again an online platform, and we are working with our suppliers to bring more and more of those suppliers to a point where they're disclosing fully their carbon performance data, so that we as a company can understand their full footprint, and we can encourage and work with them in their efforts to try and reduce carbon footprint and to operate more sustainably. And at this point in time, just under 50% of our procurement is now spent with suppliers who fully disclose their carbon performance data, and our intent is to try and improve that to 100%. Within the confines of our own operations, on a global basis, we have achieved a 19% reduction in carbon footprint in the last 5 years. But indeed in Ireland, you'll see in a few moments that we're leading the way, and we have far outstripped that, and you'll see some of what we're doing in Ireland. And I think we can take pride in Ireland that we are taking a lead in this area and making a substantial difference internally in our operations. But you can see that part of that is energy reduction, but also part of it is novel, more lower carbon sources of energy, such as you'll see in terms of solar, biomass, wind and so on. And across the world, you can see we have multiple installations. Again, is our water footprint. Amazing to think that 84% of it is bought in. This comes from dairy, wheat and sugar and so on. Indeed, 1/3 of that, 84% of that, is accounted for by one product, Horlicks, which is a product which is it's a consumer product which we provide. It's hugely popular in India. India is a place obviously where water is a scarce resource, so we're very conscious that we need to work closely with the local businesses and the suppliers there to help them reduce their water footprint. And we have engaged with a local NGO and produced a diagnostic tool, and we're now working with our top 30 suppliers in India to help them come up with finance programs to actually reduce their water footprint in water scarce areas. We're also working with the Carbon Trust, who are here today, in providing water diagnostics and implementing diagnostic programs internally in our own operations, particularly in areas where water is scarce, to reduce that footprint. And finally, once again, product in use. Anyone like to guess what the biggest source of water consumption is for our products in use? It's one that you can all play a part in. It's your kids brushing their teeth. Turn off the tap. It is actually 13%. You can see of GSK's entire footprint. Water footprint is associated with the water people use brushing their teeth with our products. So again, you can see, this challenge in terms of sustainability is a challenge for everybody. Internally, our operational water target is ahead of plan, and we continue to work on that, even though it is a small percentage of the overall water footprint of the company as a whole. So I'm going to step back a bit and change gear, if you like, and talk a bit about our operations in Cork. So I run the Cork site, and you can see here a photograph of a recently taken photograph of our operations in Cork. We produce, at the moment, 10 different active pharmaceutical ingredients, and in the last 18 months we also have started to produce a consumer healthcare ingredient which is used in the manufacture of Polygrip, and in fact is sent to our sister site in Dungarvan for the manufacture of that. So we have been on a journey in terms of sustainability in Cork since 2009, and it's been a long journey, but it has been a steady journey and a journey of steady progress. And I just want to give you a little snapshot of what this is about. You can see here, since 2009, we have achieved a 57% reduction in our carbon footprint. And this graph here is intended to just try and give you a flavour of what that journey looks like. And it starts really at the start by really getting a good idea of what was our base load. And you heard Conor earlier on talking about understanding where your energy load is or where our energy load was, and we put a lot of effort into understanding where that energy load was. A lot of monitoring and targeting, data gathering, and where we didn't have data, coming up with best estimates. You don't need perfect data to make progress, so coming up with best estimates and beginning a journey. And you can see in the first year alone, a 25% reduction, a huge reduction. This is the low-hanging fruit that's there in all organisations. For any organisation that hasn't embarked on energy reduction initiatives, they will find that. I'm sure everybody here has already been on that journey, and indeed we found areas where we could make this very, very significant difference, in some cases without significant capital investment. So this top-down projects approach doesn't require a huge amount of people at this point in time, because there is usually maybe a half a dozen or a dozen key projects that can be focused on, and a substantial difference made. But of course this gives people the energy and the enthusiasm to move onwards. And we started then the journey of actually really getting better metering and targeting in place, making energy performance visible. Conor talked about this. It is so important for us to make the performance visible in all of the different aspects of our operation, provide that data to our people, and encourage people to become champions of energy saving. And we found people were very much up for this because they saw not just the financial benefit, because there is a business benefit, but they saw the wider environmental responsibility agenda being played out with their help. We also found that by using our automation system, we were able to identify even more precise ways of targeting energy reductions, and that helped. So quite a number of maybe technology solutions. But I think probably central to this was this whole idea of a strong, ongoing programme that was underpinned by standards. So we found, for example, that EN 16001, that environmental management standard, was very good for putting some discipline in what we were doing and forcing us to have good policy, to have management targets, to have good audit systems, and to continue to generate continuous improvement ideas. And as we generated continuous improvement ideas, we found more projects we could find, and indeed we were then able to approach people like groups like Sustainable Energy Ireland, and found grant aid available because they could see that we were being responsible and we were making attempt, and indeed this grant aid then helped us to take the next step. So we continued that journey. EN 16001 became ISO 5001. We continued the work in terms of reducing, finding projects. All of this was about energy reduction, and got to a point in 2013 where we had made quite substantial progress. In 2013 we invested in a new facility, consumer healthcare facility, which I just mentioned, an entire new production building, all ancillary utilities and so on. It did mean an increase in energy, but we offset that through the use of renewables. And if you see the photograph I showed you just a moment ago, with the wind turbine standing in the centre or just at the back of our plant, now producing 30% of our electrical energy needs on average across the year. So in summary, as Conor said earlier, it's about involving the people, about minimising the obvious wastes, reducing those obvious wastes, selecting the right projects, and crucially for us, about good management sponsorship. So this is GSK Cork. In terms of water, again, this is what we call a Sankey diagram. The idea behind this diagram is to give you a sense that to really go after water and to reduce water, you really need to know where it's going. We put a lot of effort into mapping our water, understanding where it's going. Once we did that, we were able to focus on water. The obvious starts, leaks, but then going beyond the leaks, how do we optimise our use of steam, condensate, how do we recycle water where possible, etc., etc. And again, just by coincidence, actually, another 57% reduction over 7 years. So both energy and water we have been able to make very substantial inroads. This is our site and our sites in Dungarvan. So in Dungarvan we have a consumer healthcare operation. Two aspects to this: there's oral care and over-the-counter. So oral care products like Polygrip, Polydent, and others are made, and over-the-counter would be associated with Panadol and other such over-the-counter medicines. I won't steal Adrian McCarthy's thunder because Adrian is actually presenting later on today, but suffice to say that the team in Dungarvan have also engaged in the same form of exercises we've been engaged in Cork, understanding the baseline and really going after multiple projects with multiple people as well as continuous improvement. And there is a snapshot of the projects which Adrian will describe later on today. Again, this providing a journey towards carbon neutral, looking at some novel options, and including renewables and biomass boiler, etc., etc. So for those of you interested in that, Adrian will be talking later on this afternoon. But again, part of the same journey, an opportunity to make a substantial inroad in our internal operations. There is great help available. So for those people who are not already on the journey, Sustainable Energy Ireland do a great job, and indeed also, in fairness, provide some recognition. So as a site in Cork, we were recognised in 2011 for the work that we were doing, and again in 2013, and again in 2014. So there is, if you like, as well as the financial benefit, as well as the moral imperative to do so, people more and more are beginning to recognise the activities of companies who are making an effort in this area. So to finish, maybe I'll just step back again to talk about GSK as a whole. We are committed to responsible operations and committed to environmental sustainability. I'm not saying it's easy. There are challenges. You saw some of the challenges in relation to our supply chain and the work that we need to do with our suppliers. There are challenges in relation to consumption. Not all the solutions are simple and instant. We need to work with other partners, particularly in the relation to redesign of products in a more sustainable manner. As demand for products grow, and people have a right to demand new medicines and so on. We have an ambition and indeed an obligation to meet those needs. But we are on this journey and continue to be determined to make an inroad. As a group as a whole, we've at this point in time a cumulative savings of over 1 million tonnes of CO2 and consequential financial savings associated with that. And again, as a corporation in total, some recognition also beginning to emerge from bodies understanding the work that we've been doing in terms of disclosure and in terms of working with our partners in our goal to minimise our environmental impact in everything we do.